Father, we come before you tonight to grow closer to you, learn more about your word, and grow a greater understanding of you, Lord. Lord, open our eyes so we can see more of you, that we better know your will, that we know what your word says you want of us, Lord. How you want our lives to be led, how you want us to grow closer to you, Lord. And I pray that you put the words in Steve's mouth. Let tonight be all about you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Go ahead and sit. And so most of us, I think I mentioned this last week, most of us, our conceptions of Joseph have been influenced by things we've heard over the years. Maybe if you were in church as a child, you heard Sunday school lessons about Joseph in his pretty coat. Maybe you've heard sermons preached about Joseph.
I've seen the play.
You've seen the play, Joseph?
And the Mason tape recorder.
Yeah. So, and yes, go ahead.
So where do you think the coat of many colors deal came from, when it doesn't even say that in the...
I don't know. I've read some commentarians say that can mean many color coat.
Okay.
And I've read more commentarians that probably say it doesn't mean multicolor coat, it means other things. But, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in a little bit. But so I want you to open your Bibles to Genesis 37. And let's look at verses 1 through 4. In 37:1 it says, "Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him." So we have here Joseph is in the field working with 4 of his brothers. Okay, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Those are the 4 sons of those 2 mothers. Okay, and he observes them, those 4 boys, behaving in a way where he feels that he needs to tell his father. Okay? Now some will contend that Joseph was a tattletale. Okay? Do you think that Joseph was a tattletale? I'm not going to ask Karen, because Karen's after Joseph. Yes.
I think Joseph, early on, he lacked tact.
Okay, he
He was not
lacked
very tactful.
tact. Okay.
You learn that later in Egypt, though.
Okay.
I think the boys were hunted off, and so he wanted Dad to know that.
Boys were goofing off, and he wanted Dad to know that. Do you think? Okay. Anybody else?
Well, that still would have gotten him in trouble though, so that would have gotten him in trouble, and therefore it kind of circles back to tattletale.
I don't know about you guys. Does Joseph not have a responsibility to his father to tell him when the other kids are messing around? That's the way I look at it. Do you think he provoked his brothers?
I think it was that tact thing.
Tact? Okay.
He didn't have any-
Or, as I answered, asking that last question there, was he being a wise steward and exhibiting loyalty to his dad?
that's how he looked at it.
Yeah, I
His
imagine he did.
brothers looked at it from, they're the ones that got in trouble, so.
You know, when I was a child, I never got in trouble, so I was a lot like Joseph, you know. That's why I empathize with him so much. Paula looking at me like I'm crazy. So, I was always in trouble, Paula. Always.
Don't you think he demonstrated some leadership qualities that would later on,
Yeah.
so, even though he was the youngest, or next to the youngest?
Have any of you experienced someone coming to you to tell you about your children not behaving? Marcia, yeah.
Yeah.
Were you grateful for that information, or were you ungrateful for that information?
I was grateful.
Okay,
Depends on what it was.
Yeah.
depending upon if it was done genuinely, that would be part of it. Sometimes people, they just like to jab you through your kids. You know, part of Tiffany's problem growing up was her dad was a school superintendent, so I held her to a higher standard than I held all the other kids. So if there was a chance to jab her, they would jab her. So, but
They did. They did.
yeah, they did. Yeah. I don't know. You know, you get to make up your own mind whether or not he was a tattletale, whether or not he was showing wisdom, discernment, maturity, going and telling his dad. I don't know. Was he a trustworthy son? Yes, Paul.
Isn't the whole situation just messed up though? I mean, Jay,
Yeah, we figured that
how can you point to one person and say he's a tattletale? Which he is, but look at the whole situation, the whole thing is,
Yeah.
The father shows favoritism, the boys hate each other, he's
Yeah.
spoiled, you know,
it's
too
Yeah.
many words.
Yeah, too many wives. Okay, so yeah, it is a bad situation. So just keep in mind, just keep an open mind as we continue. Somebody look at Ephesians 4 and read 29 through 31. And somebody else read Colossians 3:8. Ephesians 4, 29 through 31.
Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, and that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, and slander, along with every word of malice.
Okay, and then Colossians 3:8.
But now you also put them all aside, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive speech from your mouth.
Okay, so what does Paul say about slander and malicious conversation in general? Just get rid of it, correct? Just do not partake of it. So, if it incited his brothers to anger, and we know it did, they should have put it away, okay? Okay. They had a responsibility in regards to the situation too. So, when you look, going back to Genesis, in Genesis 3, it talks about this coat. So, after the father gave Joseph the coat, 37:3, after the father gave Joseph the coat, what do you think Joseph should have done with it? I think he had to wear it, because he would have disappointed his dad if he didn't.
Because he didn't have to do this.
Karen's got tape on this whole thing, and she hasn't shared it. You mean he was flaunting it? Okay. translated from is a word kathoneth. Kathoneth. And it can also mean it can also mean a cover or a shirt, okay? Such as a garment or a robe. And the word for varicolored, multicolored in the Hebrew is the word pak, P-A-C, pak. And you know, the Hebrew is hard to pronounce in English because there's no vowels in Hebrew. And what that means is, can mean two things. It means the sole of your foot or the palm of your hand. So it can mean it could mean a long sleeved, we've said long sleeved coat, a very long tunic, you know, because most tunics weren't really that long. They were, they cut a hole in it like a sheet, pulled it over their head, and then put a belt on it. So and the only other place, look at Samuel, 2 Samuel 13:18. Somebody read 2 Samuel 13:18, because that's the only other place where this phrase is used in the Bible. 2 Samuel 13:18.
Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her.
And who was she? Does it say who she was?
Tomorrow.
Hmm?
Tomorrow.
Okay. So and so if it's the same type of meaning, then it's like a coat worn by royalty. Okay. And that says multicolored and a robe. So so when you look at that, yeah, you can understand why his brothers are upset. Yeah, you know, look at what Dad gave Joseph. You know, how come he gets that nice coat? We're getting secondhand clothes over from Goodwill, and he's wearing those nice clothes. You know, so I don't. I understand why they were angry. They were just functioning in their humanness. And it had to be obvious to his brothers that of the implications of the code. Because the implications of the code is Joseph's top dog. Okay? He's the one that's going to receive the birthright. So go back a little bit in Genesis and look at 29. 31 and 32. The children of Jacob. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Reuben, for she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. Okay? So the firstborn, Reuben, traditionally would have received the birthright, right? But why did he not receive the birthright? What does 35:22 tell you? Somebody look at that. Genesis 35:22. Okay, that's not really what I was looking for. Look at the First Chronicles reference. See if you can. Reuben, you know, they named a sandwich after him. But he didn't quite cut the mustard.
I think the heat got to you.
And then- Reuben.
That's why they use coleslaw.
Yeah. First Chronicles, did anybody find First Chronicles
that his genealogy is not listed according to his birthright.
So how did he defile his father's bed?
What the song?
Yeah, he slept with one of them. I forget who it was. So, he loses the birthright. And what's so significant about this birthright deal anyways? Well, when the father dies, the birthright, the person gets a double portion, right? Of the estate. They are then considered to be the head of the family, including the spiritual head of the family. Reuben was the eldest son, but he forfeited that position when he slept with Bilhah. And then the firstborn rights, Jacob transferred them to Joseph, the eldest, through the one he loved, Rachel. Okay? So, was Jacob wrong in picking Joseph over Reuben? Or let me ask you this way, I'm not sure. Do you think he picked Joseph solely based upon his affection for him? Or did he see something else in him? Did he see leadership qualities in him? Somebody mentioned that earlier. Was Jacob a firstborn? No. Was Isaac a firstborn? But did God work through those men? And I don't know, when you read about these other brothers, they all had some issues. Simeon and Levi had disgraced the family. In Genesis 34, it talks about the slaughter of a city, Shechem, I think it's called, S-H-E-C-H-E-M, I think it is Shechem. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, that's where we read they were out playing in the field, doing something. I'm not sure what they were doing wrong in the field, but so it seems as if Jacob wanted to have somebody lead the family that was inclined towards leadership. Because was Jacob a good businessman? Yes, he was. He got fooled, but he really made a lot of money for, what's his name, Laban. He helped him a lot. So,
Good or shrewd?
who? Jacob? Yeah, combination. Yeah. I think though, one thing about Jacob, I think Jacob, as he got older, really grew in the Lord. He had to be on his knees all the time with all those wives. He was praying a lot. Dear Lord, help me. So I think as he grew, as he matured in age, he matured in his relationship. And we think about Joseph. Evidently, the Egyptians saw something in Joseph. He was able to interpret the dreams, but they also, he ended up being the boss of a lot of different things. So really, let me at least have you entertain this thought, that for Joseph, the coat, at least, was a no-win situation. If he didn't wear the coat, even though he flaunted it, he would disappoint his father. If he did wear it, his brothers would be reminded that he had been set apart in regards to their father's affection, and they probably despised him all the more. So the coat represented everything. You know who most resents morality? Yeah, immoral men. And I think in some ways the coat represented morality to these brothers. And if the coat was such a big deal, that if one of them had just put it on, would it have changed them? No, it wouldn't have changed. The coat doesn't make the man. It's the man that makes the coat. So just think about situation, try to think of it from Joseph's point of view also, okay? So, open your Bibles now to 1 Peter. 1 Peter 5. And the brothers, they did take out their anger. It's obvious from the scriptures, they took out their anger on their brother. Later on, they would take God's revenge upon him. I would call that when they threw him in the pit. And they, like we've said, they were hurt, they were angry, but Joseph wasn't, I don't think Joseph solicited a coat. I think it was Jacob's preferential treatment of Joseph that caused the big part of the problem. And Ephesians 4:6 says we're not to be angry, we're not to sin, we're not to let the sun go down on your anger. Boy, that's an important one for married couples. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. But the problem was not that the brothers had negative feelings towards Joseph. The problem is what they did with those feelings, okay? And this is an important lesson for anybody. They couldn't change. Could they change the way their father felt about Joseph? Nope. They couldn't change the actions that their father took towards Joseph. They couldn't change the circumstances, but they could have changed their own attitude. They have that ability. So instead of responding in an ungodly manner, they could have responded in a godly manner. They could have reacted, put aside sin, and tried to react in a better way. They didn't resolve their anger, and the devil had, because of that, it allowed the devil to work, his demons to work in their family. So look at 1 Peter 5, 6 through 8. Somebody read that for us. And just stay there for a little bit when you get there.
Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour.
So what's the subject matter here in 1 Peter 5? What's this chapter about? Okay, being submissive.
Humility.
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 Okay.
Doing things for God's glory.
Doing things for God's glory. Okay. So in verse 6, when you find yourself, this is a primer on how to handle anger. That's what I would call these 3 verses, 6, 7, and 8. When you find yourself angry, what does verse 6 say you should do? You should humble yourself before the Lord. And the inference then is that you have no right to be angry. That when you humble yourself, I would maintain that if you are humble before the Lord, you cannot be angry. Okay? And so, if the brothers had humbled themselves, what does it say the Lord will do? He will
He'll lift you up.
lift you up, exalt them. Okay? They will be exalted. Okay? And then, if they humbled themselves, they would be exalted. And then in verse 7 it says, so humble yourself, the Lord exalts you in your humility, and then what do you do with it? You cast it. Okay? And what does your version say? You cast your cares? Anxiety. Some will say anxiety. That Greek word for casting is epirifo. Epirifo. And epirifo means you throw it. Okay? You throw it away. You throw it, it means to throw upon. Okay? And imna. And when imna, it's exactly what it's care, anxiety. So what it says is, because I always tell people, the biggest problem Christians have with their issues is they give them to the Lord when they grab them right back. Well, here, Father, take this burden from me, and then 15 minutes later they say, well, let me have that back. And a lot of people, you know why they take it back? Because they want it. You know why they want it? They're comfortable. They have a comfort level in that. The Satan has convinced them that that's a comfortable thing in their life. So, and that's why the use of this word here is very, very purposeful, okay? You are to throw your cares upon the Lord. Yes.
So, this is not saying, instead of taking your anger out at the person, to complain to God.
Yes.
That is not what it's saying.
It says, instead of being angry at that person, okay? And this scripture transcends anger against a person. It can have a much wider, application than just the area of anger. But whatever are your concerns, whatever are your cares, whatever are your anxieties, those things you can give to the Lord. And if you humble yourself, He will exalt you, it says. And then you can throw those. See, you have to humble yourself because you're not prepared mentally to give those things up until you humble yourself. It does you no good. See, that's what Christians do. I'm mad at them. Here, take this, Lord. Well, you give it to the Lord in anger. You have to be humble first, and then you can get to the point where, because, see, what you're looking at here is, this is an exhortation to elders. This is how elders are to behave in the church. Look at verse 5:1. We'll take a little time here. The elders who are among you I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion but willingly, not for dishonest gain but eagerly. That idea of dishonest gain is probably because of Judas, who we'll talk about Sunday night. And then he says, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. And then, see, so now he's opened with that opening sentence, and now he's going to tell you how to keep yourself out of trouble, how to keep Satan away from you. And if you look, well, I won't go in. 5:3 speaks to these ideas. These are all what are temptations for pastors. The first one in 5:3 is not as being over lords those entrusted to you. That the inference there is don't be lazy. Okay, this is a warning to pastors. Don't be lazy. The second thing it talks about is money. Don't try to gain money, finances dishonorably. And then the third thing is that it speaks about it's not to be a demagogue is what I would call it. You're not to lord yourself over the flock. When you get to a position where it becomes more about you than the flock, then you need to go ahead and pull the plug and go. Pastors need to find something else to do then. But in 5 and 6, okay. Therefore, humble yourself, very purposeful, under the mighty hand of God. What does that sound like? That's an Old Testament phrase. Okay? Peter really didn't become a Bible teacher until the Lord's ascension. Peter never received power until Jesus left. uses that expression, it's a symbol of God's power in how he works, God works his sovereign purpose in humanity. So what Peter's telling these guys is, don't fight against the sovereign hand of God. Humble yourselves. He says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Okay? And then the readers, they're going to read that, and they're going to understand. See, this is Peter's writing to a group of guys that are this is a very, very persecuted group of people. And he's saying, you're being persecuted, but you still got to be strong. You still got to humble yourself. Allow yourself to fit into the sovereignty that God has for you. And then God will exalt you. Okay? It says exalt you in due time. He will lift you, then he will lift. See, that's the thing about Christianity is be submissive. And what does God do? You be submissive and God exalts you. Okay? It's completely different from the world. The world says, look at me. Here I am. Christianity is completely different. And then he says, cast all your care, anxiety upon him. And like I said, it means to throw something. It means to, really the best way, if you wanted to write it in there, throw something. Your care, your anger, whatever it is your issue is, throw your tobacco on something. So in this instance, you throw your dependency, whatever it might be, you throw it, MacArthur says to throw it like a blanket on a donkey. And what does a donkey do? It carries burdens. It's, you know what, and donkeys you can throw a lot of stuff on a donkey, because donkeys are strong. Rocky had donkeys. He used to take them up in the mountains and haul back these big logs and stuff with these donkeys. And, I guess they were donkeys. Donkeys or mules or something like that. They're all in the same family, aren't they? Donkeys and mules. And what else is there? There's three. There's a donkey and a mule and Is that the nomenclature? Is that the problem? No. I'm not talking about that. But
They are a burden-bearing animal. Right.
yes, they're a burden-bearing animal. They're exactly. So submit yourself, humble yourself via humility, and then God will exalt you. And then you have to be willing, once you're humble, to trust in the Lord. And that's a real formula. You could put there, that's a formula for a victorious Christian living. Humble yourself. Allow the Lord to exalt you, and in exalting you, he'll lead you. He'll show you his will. And then put your burden, whatever the burden is, upon him. You know, that's counseling 101. If you can get people to recognize what their issue is, if you can get them to speak it, probably 85-90% of the time, once they understand, this is my burden, this is my burden, this is what's wrong, if you can get them to speak it, you can have victory over it. Okay? So, I want you to go back to Genesis. We're going to talk about dreams. And as you read, we're going to read all these dreams. So get your Genesis, get your mojo on. Get ready to read. Help us all read these. And as you read these, I want you to think about what the commonality, the question is, what do you think is the commonality in these dreams and visions? And did God has spoken to people for years through dreams/visions. Okay? The founder of Clovis Christian Schools Incorporated had a vision. As he had a dream, and in that dream he had a vision. And it began very indistinct. I don't know if I've told you this before, but maybe some of you haven't heard it. And in a building. Okay? And then, as the clouds began to recede, it became more distinct, and then he could see a schoolhouse. And then as he prayed about it, and this guy was a prayer, he had a prayer closet. And he had a prayer closet. He had lined his prayer closet in gold leaf, following Old Testament, the customs of the Old Testament, like the tabernacle. And when he prayed, he was a prayer. So he prayed about it, he sought the Lord. The dream became more distinct. It started to, he could make other buildings out. And then it began to be colorized. Started to, as the clouds parted more, it became more and more distinct, more and more color. And then he saw 7 churches holding up a schoolhouse. And he's a construction worker. So he prays about what does this mean? And he feels God's telling me to start a school, a Christian school supported by churches. So he went to, him and another lady went to every church in the community. In Clovis, a town of 45,000 people, probably had 55 churches, a lot of churches, like Benson, a lot of churches. And out of those, all those churches, they got 21 churches to agree on a statement of faith. And then 7 churches gave seed money to start that school. Dreams and visions. I believe the Lord uses them today just as he always has. The problem is that oftentimes we ignore them. So read Genesis, somebody read Genesis 20, 3 through 7. Genesis.
Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, Indeed, you are a dead man, because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, She is my sister? And she, even she herself, said, He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocence of my hands, I have done this. And God said to him in a dream, Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, for I also withheld you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her.
Okay. 31, 11 through 13.
And in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, Yes, I'm listening. The angel said, Look, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the female of your flock, for I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God you met at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made a vow to serve me. Now leave this country and return to the land you came from.
31:24.
God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad.
48 and 9.
We both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret it. And Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, In my dream I saw a body of a girl.
Okay. 41, 15 and 16.
Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.
Okay, verse 28.
It is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do.
Okay. Daniel 2:1. 7:13 through 16. I'll read, I'll read Matthew 8:15 through 17 for us. Matthew 8:15 through 17. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. When evening had come, they brought him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all those who were sick, that he might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses, or some will use a different word. The underlying, what I would say is the underlying saying, and you can look at the other references if you want, is in all of these inferences, I think I was talking to Paula the other day, I do feel that by the time Jesus ascended, that there were no demon-possessed people in that part of the world. I think he healed everybody. I don't think there was any sick people left either. I think everybody, because once he started healing people, people were following him everywhere. And he was just healing people upon people upon people. But the common thread here is God. It's God. It's it. One of them, I think, mentioned an angel, a messenger of God. But the common theme here in these verses is God. God is the one. Jacob mentions God. Daniel will mention God if we took the time to look at all those verses. So this is the last section we'll spend right here. Genesis 37, 5 through 11. Or Genesis 37, 5 through 11. Or Joseph's dreams. Genesis 37, 5 through 11. Now Joseph had a dream. Okay. So he tells his brothers, and they hated him even more. Okay. So he said to them, Please hear the dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around, and bowed down to my sheaf. Okay. And his brother said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, Look, I have dreamed again, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So who interpreted Joseph's first dream? Okay, it was his brothers. Okay, and what interpretation did they give his dream?
A bad one.
That they would bow down to him. And in that interpretation, they were made angry. Okay? How about his second dream? Who interpreted his second dream? His brothers, but mainly Jacob. And notice what he did. Now the interpretation is me and your mother and your brothers are going to bow down to you. Okay? And how did he respond to Joseph? He did what? He rebuked him, it says. So all these, if you can look at all those dreams and visions I put up there on top, they all are God-centric. None of these, and most of these on top are interpretations of dreams and visions. None of these interpretations on the bottom of Joseph's dreams were God-centric. Nobody went to God and asked God to illuminate those dreams to them. And if you have have a dream or a vision from God of what you're supposed to do, and if there's sections or portions that you don't understand, and even if you do understand, I still think you need to take it back to the Lord to get affirmation from the Lord that what you believe those dreams to be are in fact accurate. Okay? Because man has a habit of running ahead of God. And when you do, you always end up in trouble when you run ahead of God. You want to, when you're trying to function for the Lord, you need to go very slow. I don't know how long we prayed about leaving First Baptist here in Benson before we left. A long, long time. And you know when we left? When God said, it's time to leave. The next week, we told everybody we could tell. We even handed out business cards and said, look at what the Lord is doing. Isn't it great? Can you rejoice with us? Whew, baby.
Yeah.
So, that's what we thought. If it was of God, we should be able to rejoice. So. Any thoughts? Anybody?